I've always told myself that I was one of those husbands who would know. You hear about men being completely blindsided by their wives' affairs, and you think, that could never be me. I pay attention. I know her. But looking back now, I understand something I wish I had known earlier. You never truly see the betrayal coming from the person you trust the most. My name is Daniel, I'm 36, and until a few months ago I genuinely thought I had a great marriage. Or at least, a stable one. My wife, Melissa, and I had been together for almost 8 years. We weren't perfect, but we communicated, we laughed together, we made plans. Real plans. House, vacations, maybe kids in the next couple of years. That illusion shattered on a cold Thursday night in October. It wasn't something dramatic at first. No lipstick-stained collar, no mysterious hotel bills, no overheard phone call. It was one simple moment, almost boring, almost forgettable, when I asked her, "Hey, do you want to watch something tonight?" She didn't look up from her phone. She didn't smile like she usually did. She didn't even blink. She said, too quickly, too sharply, "I can't. I'm exhausted." But she wasn't exhausted. She was dressed nicer than usual for a workday. She smelled like a perfume I didn't recognize. And yet she barely acknowledged me when she walked in. Something deep inside me shifted, just a tiny click of discomfort. A moment of intuition I tried to ignore, but it stayed. For the next 3 weeks, the signs got harder to dismiss. She started going to yoga class 3 times a week. Her phone was always face down, password changed. She smiled at messages she never explained. She suddenly cared way too much about her appearance, and she stopped touching me, not coldly, but cautiously, as if intimacy required lying. The strangest part, she was kinder. Affairs don't always lead to cruelty. They sometimes lead to guilt-driven sweetness. She cooked dinner more often. She complimented me randomly. She brought home wine for date nights she always canceled later. It felt like she was apologizing for something I wasn't allowed to know. Then came the night that everything snapped into place. Melissa was in the shower when her phone lit up on the bathroom counter. I wasn't snooping. I was brushing my teeth when the screen reflected in the mirror behind her. A message preview appeared, "Last night. I can't stop thinking about you." From a contact saved as E. James, work. My heart stopped. The words weren't ambiguous. They weren't open to interpretation. They weren't something coworkers sent one another. When she stepped out of the shower, wrapped in a towel, humming to herself, the world felt unreal. My pulse echoed in my ears. "Everything okay?" she asked, shaking water from her hair. I nodded. I smiled. I kissed her forehead. I already knew I couldn't confront her. Not yet, because people lie when cornered, but facts don't lie. I needed more than suspicion. I needed truth. So the next morning, after she left for work, I did something I didn't think I was capable of. I Googled, "private investigator near me." And that decision unraveled everything I thought my marriage was. Most people imagine private investigators as grizzled ex-cops with trench coats and whiskey breath. Not Rick. Rick looked like a retired history teacher. Corduroy blazer, wire-framed glasses, surprisingly kind eyes. I expected intimidation. Instead, he offered coffee and a soft, steady voice. "So," he began gently, "tell me what made you think your wife is cheating." I didn't cry. I didn't break. But my voice shook as I replayed the message, the changes in her behavior, the lies disguised as excuses. Rick nodded slowly. "You'd be surprised how common this is," he said. "Most people who come here aren't paranoid. They're intuitive." "You noticed the shift?" I swallowed hard. "Yes. Here's how this works," he explained. "I'll follow her for a week. Take photos, videos, document where she goes, who she meets, and when. I don't interfere. I don't confront. I just observe. And if nothing's there? I asked quietly. Then you get peace of mind, he replied. I laughed bitterly. Peace of mind wasn't coming. Rick contacted me after 2 days. Daniel, he said over the phone, can we meet today? My chest tightened. No update is ever that urgent unless something's wrong, I thought. When I arrived, Rick already had a folder on the table. Your wife didn't go to yoga on Tuesday, he said gently. I nodded, silent. She drove to a residential neighborhood 20 minutes away. Parked. Sat in her car for 7 minutes. Then a man got in. My vision blurred for a moment. Rick slid a picture toward me, Melissa. In her car. Smiling at a man I'd never seen. He looked younger than me, better looking, confident, comfortable. Rick continued. They were in the car for 40 minutes. Some kissing. Nothing explicit. But the intent was clear. I clenched my teeth as the room spun. Afterward, Rick added, they went to a cafe. They laughed the whole time. They touched hands. They looked. Close. Close. My wife was close with another man, not distant, not ashamed, close. It felt like someone poured acid inside my lungs. Rick hesitated before delivering the last blow, and Daniel. He wasn't just a stranger. I ran a background check. He tapped the photo. His name is Evan James. Your wife's coworker. They've worked together for 3 years. 3 years. 3 years she never mentioned his name. I didn't trust myself to speak. Rick gently put a hand on the folder. Do you want me to continue surveillance? I nodded, because I already knew something. If they were willing to meet in daylight. They were willing to meet for more. What I didn't know yet was just how deep the lies ran. On day 5, I did something stupid. I followed her myself. Rick had already told me where she was heading, downtown, not to yoga but to the same neighborhood again. But I needed to see with my own eyes. Needed confirmation that my marriage was truly dead. I stayed 2 cars behind her. My hands shook the whole time. She parked in an alley beside an apartment building. She got out, checked her phone, looked around nervously. A door opened. Evan stepped out. He looked at her like she was something precious, something he owned. She melted into his arms. She kissed him first, and I knew with sickening clarity, this wasn't a fling. This wasn't a mistake. This was a second relationship. A hidden life. My wife had 2 versions of herself, and one of them was standing right there in the arms of another man. I didn't confront them. I couldn't. I watched in silence as they disappeared into his apartment, and I stayed in my car, gripping the steering wheel until my knuckles went white, until my teeth hurt from clenching, until my chest ached from trying not to scream. They didn't come out for 3 hours. When she finally walked back to her car, her hair was messy, her cheeks flushed, her smile soft and satisfied like she'd just come from a spa. It took everything in me not to collapse. I drove home numb, parked, sat on the couch, stared at the wall. When she came home hours later, she kissed me on the forehead. The yoga class ran late, she said softly. I didn't move, didn't blink. She walked past me. And I finally understood something painful. The woman I loved was a ghost. The person I trusted was a stranger. And the marriage I believed in, it had been dead long before I realized it. David used to think silence was peaceful. The kind of soft, gentle quiet you get on early Saturday mornings when the sun has barely risen. When the house is still asleep, when life hasn't had a chance to throw anything at you yet. But after hiring Mark, the private investigator, silence turned into something sharper. It had weight. It pressed against his chest. It filled every corner of his house. It followed him into his car, into the shower, into his own mind. It was the kind of silence that sounded like waiting for an explosion, and every day after work, David would come home, unlock the front door, and pause. Listening. Listening for something unusual. Listening for a voice, a whisper, a lie. Listening for the sound of his marriage cracking, finally loud enough to hear, but Emily was always there, smiling. Cooking. Asking about his day, everything okay? She would ask him sometimes, tilting her head with that familiar gentle expression, and every time, David found himself answering, yeah. Just tired, even though exhaustion had nothing to do with it. He had never been a good liar. But oddly, lying to her had become easier with each passing day, because he knew she was lying to him first. David used to think silence was peaceful. The kind of soft, gentle quiet you get on early Saturday mornings when the sun has barely risen, when the house is still asleep, when life hasn't had a chance to throw anything at you yet. But after hiring Mark, the private investigator, silence turned into something sharper. It had weight. It pressed against his chest. It filled every corner of his house. It followed him into his car, into the shower, into his own mind. It was the kind of silence that sounded like waiting for an explosion, and every day after work, David would come home, unlock the front door, and pause. Listening. Listening for something unusual. Listening for a voice. A whisper, a lie. Listening for the sound of his marriage cracking, finally loud enough to hear, but Emily was always there, smiling. Cooking. Asking about his day, everything okay? She would ask him sometimes, tilting her head with that familiar gentle expression, and every time, David found himself answering, yeah. Just tired, even though exhaustion had nothing to do with it. He had never been a good liar. But oddly, lying to her had become easier with each passing day, because he knew she was lying to him first. Emily's behavior didn't shift dramatically. It was subtle, barely noticeable unless you watched her closely. David watched her closely. One night, she announced she had to stay late at the clinic again. Another night, she said she was too tired for dinner. Another, she suddenly insisted on needing more space. These weren't crimes. They weren't even evidence. But when you know the storm is coming, even the smallest breeze feels like a warning. And the worst part, David never confronted her, not because he was afraid of the truth, but because he already had someone digging it out for him, and because he wanted to see how far Emily would go. Mark texted him 3 days into the investigation, got movement. She left work at 5:12 p.m. Not heading home. Will update. David's hands trembled as he stared at the message, movement, as if she were prey being tracked. He waited for more updates. Minutes felt like hours. Finally, another text. She drove to Willow Creek Apartments, apartment 302, stayed 42 minutes, left alone. David's pulse hammered. 42 minutes, not an hour. Not a quick drop-off. But 42? What the hell is 42 minutes? When he asked Mark for details, the investigator kept it vague. No physical contact observed today. We'll continue surveillance. That night, Emily came home smelling faintly of jasmine lotion, the same one she always used. But David noticed something else. Something he never would have noticed before, a faint trace of men's cologne, not enough to be obvious, not enough for confrontation, but enough for suspicion to harden into something cold and sharp. Emily kissed him on the cheek and said, "I missed you today." David swallowed the bitterness rising in his throat. If betrayal had a taste, he was starting to recognize it. By the end of week 1, the investigation had become a ritual. David would sit in his car after work, engine running, staring at his phone, waiting for Mark's updates like a man waiting for a medical diagnosis he already fears. He couldn't sleep. He couldn't focus. Every vibration of his phone jolted him. Every message from Mark rewired his reality. On Thursday, the update came earlier than usual. She left work early, picked up groceries, stopped by a pharmacy. No suspicious behavior. Following for the rest of the evening. Groceries, pharmacy, routine things. For one terrifying second, David wondered, what if I'm wrong? What if I'm losing my mind? What if she's just living? Guilt stung him. Until the next message came 2 hours later. She's at Willow Creek again, apartment 302. Stayed 1 hour 18 minutes. Left with hair slightly messy. Possible intimacy. David's vision blurred. He reread the message 5 times, hoping the words would change if he stared long enough. They didn't. He felt something inside him break. A quiet snapping, like the sound of a dry twig being crushed underfoot. That night, Emily returned home cheerful, humming softly, placing her keys on the counter as if her soul were spotless. But David wasn't looking at his wife anymore. He was looking at a stranger wearing her face. David didn't yell, didn't confront, didn't accuse. That would come later. For now, he watched. He became a ghost in his own home, present in body but drifting through moments without truly being there. He studied her, her movements, her tone, her excuses, and one by one, the pieces of his marriage began to fall apart in his mind. Emily no longer reached for his hand when they sat on the couch. She slept facing away from him. She stopped laughing at his jokes. She even changed how she hugged him, lighter, shorter, as if her arms were remembering another man. And comparing the two, he found himself counting the seconds she held him. 5 seconds. 4 seconds. 2 seconds. Each one felt like a verdict. On Sunday morning, Mark requested a short in-person meeting. David drove to a small diner outside town. The kind of place few people visited, exactly why Mark chose it. The investigator sat in a booth, tapping a thick manila envelope against the table. His face was unreadable. Morning, Mark said calmly. David slid into the seat across from him. You said it was urgent? It's something you should see sooner rather than later. David's stomach knotted. Mark opened the envelope and spread out several still photographs. David felt the world rock beneath him. There was Emily, his wife, walking into apartment 302. There she was again, close to a tall man with broad shoulders and dark hair. Another picture, the man brushing a loose strand of her hair behind her ear. Another, Emily laughing, her hand resting briefly on his chest. The images blurred together like a slideshow of heartbreak. David felt nauseous. His vision tunneled. His fingers went numb. His breath wouldn't stay steady. Mark kept talking, but David barely heard him. Multiple visits. Body language. Intimate familiarity. David swallowed hard, trying to hold himself together. How many times? He managed to ask. 6 documented visits in the last 9 days, Mark said. Likely more before surveillance began. It hit David like being shoved underwater. No air. No escape. Just crushing pressure. What's his name? David whispered. We're still confirming identity, Mark replied. But we have a license plate. He's local. And he's definitely involved. Definitely involved. The words felt like poison. David closed his eyes. He didn't want vengeance. He didn't want explanations. He didn't want tears or apologies or excuses. He wanted his life back. The life he had before the man in the photos existed. But he couldn't have it, and that realization hurt more than anything. That night, David came home early. Earlier than Emily expected. She was in the kitchen chopping vegetables for dinner. When she turned, her smile faltered just for a fraction of a second, a fraction. But David caught it. "You're early," she said. "Traffic was light." "Lucky you." She turned back to the cutting board, her voice too steady. David stepped closer, quiet, careful, evaluating. He studied her hands, her wedding ring, the tiny tremble when she realized he was watching her too closely. "Everything okay?" she asked again. David opened his mouth. For the first time, he almost said it, almost asked, "Who is he?" Almost demanded the truth she owed him, but he didn't. "Not yet." Instead he said, "Yeah. I'm fine." And for the first time, Emily looked almost disappointed that he didn't push further, as if she were prepared for a fight that didn't come, as if her mind was already rehearsing lies. That's when David realized something bone deep and awful. She didn't guilt herself anymore. She wasn't struggling with remorse. She wasn't hesitating. She had become comfortable with betrayal, and that truth gutted him more than the photos. 3 days later, at 9:46 p.m., Mark called. He never called. He only texted. Something was wrong. David stepped outside onto the porch. "What's going on?" Mark exhaled sharply. "We identified the man." David's grip tightened on the phone. "Who is he?" "His name is Travis Whitmore," Mark said. 37. Divorced. Lives alone in Willow Creek Apartments. David didn't recognize the name, Mark continued, but that's not the important part. David felt his heartbeat stutter. "Then what is?" "He works at the same clinic as your wife." The world tilted. "He's a doctor there," Mark said. "Orthopedics. And according to staff records, he's been at the clinic for 3 years." David staggered back, leaning against the porch railing. 3 years. 3 years of working together. 3 years of possibility. 3 years of secrets. "David," Mark added gently, "this didn't start last week." David closed his eyes. He didn't want to know the next question forming in his mind, but he asked anyway, "How long?" There was a pause on the line. Then Mark said the words that sliced through the final threads holding David together, based on their interactions. "I'd estimate 6 to 9 months. 6 to 9 months, almost a year of lies, of pretending, of choosing another man every single day." Emily wasn't slipping away from him, she had already left. David didn't sleep that night. He sat in the dark, staring at the wall, replaying every moment of the past year, realizing how much of it had been a script she had memorized. Every kiss, every late-night shift, every "I'm tired," every "I love you." All of it rewritten in his mind with new meaning. And at dawn, when Emily left for work, wearing the same perfume she always wore, David decided that part 3 of his life would begin today. Not just confrontation, not just answers, but consequences. And for the first time since the investigation began, David felt something other than heartbreak. He felt resolve, a cold, controlled, razor-sharp resolve. Because the truth was out. And in part 3, truth turns into action. "I didn't sleep the night after Mason handed me the final folder." His words replayed in my head again and again. "You're braver than you think." But the truth always lands harder than the suspicion. He was right. Suspicion is light. Suspicion floats. Suspicion lets you keep breathing. But truth has weight. Truth crushes. And now it was sitting on my chest, refusing to let me breathe. I don't know how long I lay there in the darkness, staring at the ceiling. When the first hint of dawn touched the blinds, I was still awake. The house felt too still, too silent, like it was holding its breath along with me. By the time Elena came home that afternoon, I was so exhausted I felt hollow. She walked through the door looking like a ghost, pale, tense, her eyes swollen from crying. She paused in the entryway when she saw me sitting on the couch, the PI's folder in my lap. Something inside her broke instantly. I saw it in her expression, a flicker of panic, then sorrow, then resignation. She opened her mouth, but no sound came out. I didn't speak. I didn't yell. I didn't accuse her. I simply placed the folder on the coffee table and slid it toward her. "Look at it," I said quietly. Her hands shook as she reached for it. She flipped it open. And I watched the moment the color drained from her face. She stared at the pictures, the hotel hallway, the elevator, the lobby bar where she sat with him, her hand on his knee, leaning into him. She stared at the screenshots, the text messages she thought she deleted, the time-stamped calls, the calendar entries. Then she saw the hardest part, the video still, her walking into the hotel room with him. I didn't include the video itself. I couldn't bring myself to watch it. "Please. Please, don't do this," she whispered, pressing her hand to her mouth. "Please, you don't understand." "I understand enough," I replied. She sobbed once, a sharp painful sound, and then closed the folder with trembling fingers. "You weren't supposed to see this," she said quietly, "for some reason." That line hit me harder than all of it. "Really?" I said. "That's what you're upset about? Not that you did it, but that I found out?" "No," she said quickly, wiping her face. "No, that's not what I meant. It was a mistake. A horrible, awful mistake. I wasn't thinking. I wasn't myself. I felt lonely, and worthless, and lonely." I said sharply. "Elena, you were lonely? And your solution was to sleep with someone else? Someone you brought into our home as a friend?" She winced. "I didn't mean to hurt you," she whispered. "That's the thing," I said. "You didn't hurt me because you didn't mean to. You hurt me because you didn't care enough not to." She shook her head violently. "No. No, that's not true. I cared. I care. I've always cared." I stared at her, for the first time in weeks, truly stared, not at the woman I married, but at the stranger standing in front of me. "You care," I repeated softly. "But you didn't stop." She froze. "You didn't stop," I said again, my voice quiet but sharp as glass. "This wasn't a one-time slip. It wasn't a moment of weakness. It was a choice you made over and over." Her bottom lip trembled. She didn't deny it, because she couldn't. She sank down onto the couch beside me, covering her face with both hands. "I don't know what's wrong with me," she whispered through her fingers. "I don't know why I did it. I ruined everything. I ruined us. Please. Please tell me what I can do to fix this." Fix. The word tasted like ash. "You can't fix something that's already gone," I said. "You didn't just break trust. You erased it." She cried harder, leaning forward as if the weight of it all was physically crushing her. "I'm willing to go to therapy," she said desperately. "I'll do anything. Anything you want. I'll cut him off. I already have. I blocked him. I haven't seen him. Please don't give up on me." For a moment, just a moment, I felt a flicker of something, grief, maybe. Or maybe it was the ghost of the love we once had. But then I remembered the call logs, the way she smiled down at her phone in the kitchen, the way she came home exhausted and wouldn't let me touch her, the way she lied with such gentle confidence. "Why him?" I finally asked. "Why that man?" She hesitated, too long, and that hesitation was an answer in itself. Then she whispered, barely audible, because he made me feel seen. I felt something deep inside me tear straight through. Seen, I repeated, my voice cold. She nodded miserably. I didn't feel like you noticed me anymore, she said. You were distant. You were busy. And he listened. I exhaled slowly through my nose. So this is my fault, I said. That's what you're saying. No. She cried quickly. No, I'm not blaming you. I'm blaming me. I should have talked to you. I should have told you how I felt. I should have been better. The room fell into silence. A long, heavy, suffocating silence. Finally, she whispered, "Do you want me to leave?" I looked at her for a long time. She looked small. Fragile. Broken, the woman who once held my world together. Now begging not to be discarded. Did I want her to leave? Did I want her to stay? Did I want either, or neither? I realized, in that strange, suspended moment, that I didn't know what I wanted anymore. Everything felt foggy, unreal. The walls felt farther away. The air felt thin. I stood. "Elena," I said quietly, "I need time to think." Her eyes widened with hope. "Okay," she whispered. "Okay. Take all the time you need. I'll do anything. I'll give you space. Just don't disappear on me." Disappear. Funny she used that word, because that was all I wanted to do. I didn't stay at home. I didn't tell her where I was going. I packed a bag, grabbed my jacket, and walked out. Her voice followed me down the hallway, shaking, desperate, but I didn't stop. I checked into a small lakeside cabin 2 hours away. It was off-season, cold, empty, perfect. The lake was still. The trees were bare. The world felt muted, lifeless, exactly how I felt inside. Some nights, I sat outside until dawn, staring at the reflection of the moon on the water, replaying everything in my mind until I thought I'd lose it. Some nights, I couldn't even bring myself to get out of bed. I didn't call her, not once. She texted, though, every day, "I'm sorry. I miss you. I'm scared. Please come home. Please talk to me." Sometimes I typed out a response, then deleted it. Other times, I stared at her messages until the words blurred. Then one evening, 3 weeks after I left, I got a text that made my breath catch. "I think I'm pregnant." I stared at the screen, my pulse hammered in my skull. Pregnant, pregnant, with whose child? Mine? His? I didn't know. She didn't know. And that uncertainty. That horrible, suffocating uncertainty was the darkest moment of my life. She followed it with, "Please come home. We need to talk." I sat there in the cold cabin, hands trembling, staring at those words long enough for the sun to come up, and then, before I could stop myself, I stood, grabbed my keys, and left. When I arrived home, the house was silent. Elena was sitting at the kitchen table, pale, trembling, hands wrapped around a mug she wasn't drinking from. The moment she saw me, her face crumpled with relief. "I took a test," she whispered. "I'm pregnant." I nodded once, a mechanical motion, like my body moved on its own. She reached out, then stopped halfway, as if afraid I'd recoil. "I don't know how far along," she said. "I don't know." Her voice broke. "I don't know who the father is." I closed my eyes. For a long time, when I opened them, something had shifted in the room, in me, in her. A very long, very final kind of silence settled between us. She spoke first. "What do you want to do?" She asked, her voice trembling. And that was the terrible, impossible question. What did I want? What did I feel? What future existed now? She stared at me, breath trapped in her chest, waiting for the words that would determine both our lives. But no words came, not forgiveness, not hatred, not hope, not finality, just nothing, an empty, echoing nothing that spread across the room like a slow, creeping shadow. She whispered my name. I didn't answer. I simply turned toward the window, staring at the reflection of my own blurred silhouette in the glass, a silhouette I barely recognized anymore. Behind me, Elena sobbed softly into her hands. I didn't move. I didn't comfort her. I didn't decide anything. I just stood there, suspended between two lives I no longer wanted. I don't know how long we stayed like that, her broken at the table, me frozen by the window, the distance between us wider than the whole world. Eventually, the sun dipped below the horizon, and the room fell into darkness. I didn't turn on the lights. She didn't get up, and nothing, absolutely nothing, was resolved.